Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ben Adams, and I'm the Research Director for the Wharton Customer Analytics Initiative. Today, I'll be presenting an exciting new data set and research opportunity titled Measuring Skill Level and Optimizing Player Matching Algorithms in Online Games. Also on the call with me are representatives from the data sponsor who will help me answer any questions that you have. Thanks for joining me, guys. As we go forward, please feel free to use the text box to submit any questions to us. Any questions we don't get to in the time allotted will be answered via email. Before we get into the detail of the slides and the data, a few operational notes. One is that this webinar is intended for researchers and scholars. It should not be published or represented in any form without permission from WCAI. If you have questions on the program, please feel free to send an email to wciresearch@wharton.upenn.edu. If you're a member of the press and would like more information about WCAI in general, please feel free to use the WCAI press email as presented on the screen. To get access to the data, any research teams should submit a proposal to WCAI for approval. There'll be more details on the proposal process at the end of this presentation. The research opportunity is sponsored by a major international video game company. While the awarded teams will be introduced to the company, the sponsor must not be named in any publications at any time. Also, as a note to researchers, this data set is quite large. It is nearly 10 gigabytes. So as you're thinking about working with it and working on the data, you might want to think about how you're going to handle data of this size. Okay, so notes out of the way, we're going to now talk about the data set. It really breaks down into kind of three categories, and I'll touch on each one in turn. The first one is we'll talk about the game and the context of the game. The data set comes from a single multiplayer first-person shooter video game that's played on both console and PC. In general, the play consists of two teams fighting against one another. They'll have different goals depending on what game mode they're in, and they'll take place as one or more rounds on a dedicated virtual environment, also known as a server. Players can play in a round by choosing one of two options, either an instant play button that drops the user into a server that is selected by the company, or they can choose their own server, and at which point they're placed on a team. When choosing the server that they might play on, a user knows up front how crowded it is, whether the round will count towards their score and level, whether there are particular rules that apply or don't apply, and what the map or world they're playing on is. So this situation of starting play creates an important decision problem for the company. How should they match players who use this instant play feature to a particular team on a particular server? And when thinking about matching, they have to keep time in mind. Players are unwilling to wait too long to be placed into a server and a round. The company sticks to a maximum wait time of 30 seconds. But Joe, my understanding is that that wait time is a maximum, that 15 seconds is much better than 30. Is that true?
Yeah, the shorter the better for us, obviously. So, as long as, we don't really sacrifice from the quality of the matchmaking algorithm.
Great. Thank you. So, summarizing or kind of bringing it together, the key research areas for this research opportunity. Does a player's previous experience playing relate to his or her future propensity to play more? Some things that might contribute to a positive game experience could be, but not limited to, preference for teamwork. Do they play with a team, or do they tend to be off on themselves? What's their skill level? Does it make a difference whether they're the best or the worst player repeatedly over rounds? Does that make them play more or less? What does it even mean to be evenly matched on a team? Is that important? How do you define evenly matched? How about the play style of others? When they play alone, or do they prefer to play in rounds where they're forced to cooperate as a team? Are there certain maps that people who play more and have a better time play on? Or are there groups of people who play on different maps? And does even having fun or winning lead to longer play? How do you even measure fun in this context? So we should note at this point that the game is not a particularly social one. This is not poker. So the data and the data set does not include information about player interaction, and the instance of people playing together is very low in the data set. People tend to play independently, so really it's about the company having to match players to teams or servers. And why do the company care about people playing more frequently? Well, any one purchase, when the user purchases the game, they get unlimited gameplay. They can log on and play as many rounds as they please. About a third of the players in the data set choose to upgrade to a premium account. A premium account has to do with customizing their appearance, getting priority access, getting exclusive content or access to maps, and the ability to have that membership on more than one game platform. Players can also choose to purchase servers where they can set access restrictions, only these people can play or people from this country can play, and server rules. Maybe they get to have special rules or special settings for this particular server. There will be future versions of this game, and so the company hopes that people who play longer and have a better time, a better experience playing, will choose to upgrade to that previous account, will choose to purchase servers, and if they will choose to purchase additional future versions. Just as a reminder to everyone listening, if you have questions, please feel free to type them in at any time. And at appropriate points, we will answer them. And actually, we have a question from the audience. And Joe, I think this is a good one for you. Apart from just Team A and B, or red and blue, or the two teams in the game, are there players? Are there instances in which the players are further divided into subgroups, where there might be multiple subgroups per team?
Yes, we have some subgroups that they can actually choose to get in within a team. But I don't think we have that detail in the data set at the moment.
So that play style is an option, but it's not included as part of this particular data set.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so that was context and background about the game. We will now talk a little bit about the rounds and what these rounds mean. So a round, as we've mentioned before, is a unit of gameplay where at least two players are pitted against one another. There are over 750,000 unique rounds in this data set. The primary objective of a round varies depending on the server, the map, the game mode, but players generally aim to kill other players on the opposing team and avoid getting killed themselves. The maximum number of players in a round depends on the gaming platform. However, the absolute maximum is 32 players on a team at any given point. So that unlike chess, where you might have one player against another, this is really about 5, 10, 20 people playing against one another simultaneously. There's a question from the audience at this point. Do you sell game items to non-premium players? Joe, this is a question, I think, as I understand it, the only thing that's available for purchase is not one item or a better pair of shoes, but instead it's a bundle, a package. You're either premium or you're not. Is that correct?
Yes. So it's just like a bundle package that we sell. So
and that bundle package has all of those things that we talked about before: custom clothing or custom appearance, and specialized maps and other features.
That's correct.
Okay. But it's not like this particular game is not like some others where you can buy one item or two and there's a marketplace.
As a matter of fact, like, they can actually customize their purchase and, buy specific items from the bundle. But again, like, it's not included in our data set. So
Great.
That's why I was just like, answering in that way.
I understand.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. When a player gets killed, he or she has the option to go back to the round and at which they were killed and continue playing, or they can return to the lobby. Each round that they might play in has a map, a specific length, a duration, and a count of players. As we mentioned before, maps have different goals and possibly different functions, abilities, or roles for the players to play. The duration may be as short as a few minutes or as long as several hours. The data set does include the global start time in Greenwich Mean Time and the duration of the round in seconds. Some players play the entire time. Others will come in late or leave early. The maximum might be 32 players on a team at any one time, but the total players might be a bit higher. So they have the maximum number of players allowed as well as the total player count that played in that round. Okay, so in the data about the rounds also includes summaries of what happened at the end of each round. They consist of again, the start date and duration, all the players participating, even if they didn't participate for the full duration of the round, again, the maximum number of players who played, the total points that each player obtained. There's special flags, binary values for players who utilize those in-game roles and functions and abilities that I mentioned, and the player rank or level that they had at the start and end of each game. So before we look a little bit more about the data, Joe, there was a question. Can you explain a little bit more about how the company currently matches players?
Current matchmaking algorithm is pretty simple. It just looks at the experience levels of the players and their kill death ratios mostly, and then just make the matching based on these factors.
Okay, so it's not, the matching is not particularly sophisticated right now.
Not so much, yeah.
Okay, great. We have another question from the audience. Is it possible for a completely new player to enter an ongoing game in the middle of a round? Well, I can answer that one, and absolutely yes. If there's 3 players playing, perhaps one plays the entire round from beginning to end. One is there at the beginning but leaves halfway through, and the third might come in, start playing as the game is halfway through, and finish until the end. And we see all, in the data that is presented, we see all of those different combinations, possibilities of play. Okay, so we mentioned that each game, each round has a map, and you can see that there are a finite number of maps. This is a visualization that shows the number of rounds played by map. And you'll notice that there's probably about 10 or so that are much larger than the others. Joe, would you care to guess as to why those 10 are more than the other ones that are offered?
Those 10 or 9 maps, come from with the base game. So the other maps are just like, included in the premium package. So you need to, buy those maps separately.
Okay, great. Here's the players as they play may stop playing after a bit. Not everyone plays for a long time. So in our data set, we're looking at how many total players play on the nth day. So we can see that on day 4, the fourth day that they play, there's already some significant drop-off from people who only play on their first day. By the time we get out to 30 days, the 30th day of play, we're well less than half of the players that started at the beginning. Here's also a visualization of the number of rounds played by player on their nth day of play. And so you can see that it actually remains quite consistent for the first, say, 20, 25 days or so, that the number of rounds played by each individual player on their nth day is consistent. And once we get out past 30, you see the variance goes up a bit more, but the N is much smaller, as we saw from that previous slide, that fewer and fewer players are playing at 30 days, 40 days, 50 days. Here at WCAI, we made a guess of how might one measure skill level, and so we decided to choose net kills per player. So net kills would be kills minus deaths. Joe mentioned earlier that you in the matching algorithm, they use ratio of kills to deaths. Either one, or there might be other ways to measure skill. We just happen to pick this particular one of net kills. And so as we look at average net kills, you see that it again stays roughly the same, although there is a wide variance in the first half. And as the number of days that someone plays goes forward, you can see that the bars on the right, the average changes up a great deal. Again, the N goes way, way down as we get out to 40 and 50 days. So let's look at a single player. This is one player, and then the rounds they played each week also shows their average net kills. And what we can see here is that this particular single player played a few times in the first week, and then a bunch more times in a few weeks later. And you can see that his or her average net kills got better. But then towards a few spikes down, they stop playing quite as frequently, and their average net kill correspondingly goes down. And it seems to be that average net kills has to do with something that improves or goes up as someone plays more frequently. Joe, were you going to add in some insight onto this particular graphic?
I think, you just described it pretty well, so I don't have anything to add at the moment. But, if there are any questions, I can answer actually related to the graph.
Okay. So actually, that leads us to talking about the individual players. The focal sample, the sample that we have, focuses on 1,300 players who belong to two cohorts of about 650 players each. Cohort 1 began playing within the first month after product launch. Cohort 2 began playing at a later month down the road. However, Cohort 1 all started playing together in the same month, and Cohort 2 also started playing together in a particular month. The sponsor believes that there's a big distinction between players who start right away versus start sometime later. that there's differences both in behavior and purchasing habits. But with these 1,300 players, we have all the rounds that these players played for 18 months. There's a question going back before we go more into players. There's a question on the rounds and kind of gameplay. So, Joe, I'm going to ask this of you. Are there leaders in the rounds? Do teams ever have a leader?
Well, we talked about these, subgroups within the teams, and each subgroup, let's call them squads, and, they have a leader. And, like we can't really see it in the data, but, they can actually give certain orders relate to the objectives in the game to their, squad members.
Okay.
But again, it's not really going to be visible in our data set.
Are there other forms of collaboration in the game?
Yeah, just to achieve the objectives, the certain goals in the game, players need to collaborate, but again, it's going to be difficult to identify certain collaborations, within the data set again. And, within the team, one individual can act as a leader, right? That actually try to, again, collect, all the, players, and then, try to, again, just make an attack or whatever it is. But again, we can't really see that in our data set.
Okay. Great. There's another question from the audience. Are players in a team allowed to send messages to each other or social with each other in any other form? And I can actually answer that. They are allowed to send messages to one another. I think, and Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, that it's based on the platform that they're using. But again, as Joe has said a couple of times in this presentation, that kind of interaction and social activity is not reflected in the data set.
Yes, they can also do voice chat during the round within each team, but and they can actually send text messages as well. There's a chat box that they can communicate with the other team members.
But again, that's not in the data set that we have.
Yes, it's not.
Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about the players, or we've talked about the players as a group. So let's talk about one particular player. We use Andrew as an example. Obviously, we don't have anyone's real name, but we'll call this example Andrew. We know some basic information about Andrew and some historic behavioral data about him, such as his age, gender, and country, the date that his account was created with the data sponsor, the number of titles from the data sponsor that he owns, and the lifetime purchase amount at the time that he started playing this particular game. As I mentioned before, we have every round that Andrew played from the first time that Andrew launched the game. We also have this same background data of age and account creation date and titles owned for the players that Andrew played. We don't have their other rounds, but we do have all the rounds that Andrew played. Here's an example of the data that we can see. So here, this is Andrew's actual data. Again, we don't know his name is Andrew, but we'll call him Andrew for purposes of illustration. And we see that on December 29th, Andrew played a single round. He played for 1,154 seconds on a public server that was level A, or kind of map A. The game was in mode 1. I don't know what those details are, but those details will be revealed in the data set. And you can see his score and the roles and activities that he did. Excuse me, and he did quite well. He had 12 kills and no deaths. He played again on October 31st. You can see that row there. And then he binge played on November 1st, playing a whole bunch of rounds for varying number of times. And again, some of them he played a role, some of them he did not, some of them he did some activity, some of them he did not. And this gives you a sense of the sort of data that's in there. We have a question from the audience about what is known about other players. Again, we have the background of the data of the age and the country and whatnot of every single player, whether or not they're in our focal sample. We also have this same result, this same roles played, activities, kill count, death count for every single round played for every single player. So we have essentially the same data for everyone, but we only have the full, complete picture of someone's longitudinal play for these focal sample of 1,300. We have a question, and Joe, this might be better for you. It looks like the skills don't change much as players play for more days. What do you think? Why do you think that the skills don't increase?
Can I ask it, how do we actually draw that conclusion that the skills really don't change with the number of days played? First, I think we haven't still defined what is the skill, right? Like how we actually measure the skill. So just like by looking at just one factor, like experience levels or like a number of kills, it's not going to be enough to get a good understanding of the true skill of the player. But if you're just like talking about a certain measurement like a kills or experience level, I can answer that. Just
okay. Okay. I think you're right that it is the question of how do you even measure skill to decide whether or not that it changes or doesn't over time.
Exactly. Yeah. This is just one of the research questions that we have in this
Great.
study, right?
Okay. Another question we have from the audience. When you join a team, what information do you have about other players on a team? Does an individual player have any?
After joining the team, you can see their levels, experience levels, and how they are doing in the current round, like number of kills, deaths, and scores collected in that round, but nothing else, just like except the name of the player, obviously.
Okay. So we another question that we have, and I think I can answer this one, who determines the roles? Is it fully determined by the player? Can all the players within a team have similar roles? So the roles are defined. Some maps have access to different roles or are conducive to using different roles. There aren't very many. I think there's only 4 or 5 specific roles that can take. And Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that if everyone in the team can choose, they all can choose to play role 2. They may not be able to complete their objective as a team, but they could all choose at the same moment to have a particular role. Is that correct?
Yes, like all the players can select the same role, and it's going to be difficult to complete the objective without like having a variation within the team. But if they're really good, and the other team is really bad, they can actually complete the objective.
I see. It is worth pointing out at this point that a player, as is shown in Andrew's data here, a player can play more than one role over the course of a single round. They can play up to all of the roles if they want, although they'll only play one role at a time, as I understand. There's another question. How are players scored? Is it based entirely on kills and deaths? Actually, in the data set, there are two scores. There's an overall score, and there is a combat score. The combat score is related to just kills and deaths, whereas the total score includes special points for special activities. So as we look on the next additional slides, we can see, as we mentioned, data about the individual players. The age of players in the focal sample, you can see that they do range. Although we don't believe that the folks who are listed out there at 80 are actually 80. They've reported their age as 80, but or maybe they are 80, and God bless them for playing. But the majority of the players are clustered in the right and around their kind of early to mid 20s. The player tenure, this is the years since they signed up. You can see again that they're kind of clustered around 2 to 4 years. The majority of folks have a relationship with the company. People do play internationally. You can see that they're from countries all over the world, although the majority of them are from the United States and secondarily from Western Europe. But there are countries all over the place that have play in the data set. In addition, we mentioned before that the players can play on different platforms. You can see that some people stick to individual platforms, others play on more than one. You can see those there. And players have a lot of relationship with the company. Many of them own many titles, although the majority of or I guess I should say about 40% of the players own between 1 and 5 game titles. But Joe, I think, as I understand it, these game titles aren't necessarily completely separate games. They might be expansion packs or add-ons to a game that could count in this. Is that correct?
As long as I remember, it should be only like full game titles, so that should exclude all the extra content that we have. So
excellent.
So
there
I
are
can double check that, but
there are some people who have 50 or more games.
Yeah.
From you.
There are, yeah. On multiple platforms, basically, yeah.
Excellent. So that's the overall sense of the data. We're going to pause before continuing on for additional questions. We had one question from the audience, and Joe, your thoughts on this. You personally, or is there a sense at the company, what does what does contribute to a positive player experience? Apart from what the data might show, what do you think might contribute?
Well, that's a really good question. I think, we generally define it as having fun with the game, and then, the implications of having a positive experience is just like, sticking around, just like, keep playing the game and, making additional purchases within the game, or just like, buying the next installment of the game, right? So it's just like a number of things.
Great. Thank you. So to reiterate from what we saw before, the key research question is how should the company match players who use that instant play feature? How do they match them to a particular server, and how do they match them on a team, one versus team A or team B on that particular server? In addition, the sponsor is open to unique, novel research areas using that same data set. So if you see something in the data that might be interesting to research, as we presented it here, separate from that, they're open to other possibilities. Here's some just random thoughts that occurred to us. Someone might be interested in modeling unobservable customer churn, looking at how that churn might relate to skill level and other important attributes, or understanding gameplay as media consumption, and how does media consumption change, or are there patterns in the media consumption? There are a lot of benefits to participating in a WCAI research opportunity. You do get access to a unique data set. This data set is really not available anywhere else, and is really a special set. You get assistance from us in data cleaning, preparation, or processing at any point during the research opportunity. You get an opportunity for conference Q&A sessions with the research sponsor, so direct access to explain or understand, as I've been asking questions to Joe. The opportunity to present findings to the corporate sponsor at the closing symposium 1 year from now. We do ask that research teams do keep in mind that we require one member of the team to come and be present at that closing symposium. There's opportunities for additional PR for your research. And when you publish your paper at the end, which I'm sure you all will, we help promote your research paper through the WCAI SSRN Research Paper Series. I believe there are some more questions. There's a question from the audience, and Joe, you're going to have to help me with this one. So there's the level, the kind of the rank of a player that they've achieved level 1, level 2, level 3. That's based on points. Is that correct?
Yes, we can assume that they're experience points, and you collect experience points by just completing a round, completing certain objectives within the round, and just by killing people. So you can just collect points, just kill people, or just just winning the round obviously yields more points than losing the round, and just there are extra points that you get by just achieving certain goals within the game. So just based on what all the actions that in the game.
Okay. And as you accumulate points, you'll go up in level or rank. Is that correct?
Yes.
Great.
And you just carry your level to the next round, actually. So it's not like a level or just points within the round. So you just, when you're level 27, and just when you start a new round, you start as level 27.
Okay. And I might be level 27 for 3 or 4 or 5 rounds. I play a lot. I get a lot of points. I progress to level 28, and I can continue playing at level 28.
Yes.
But this level we're talking about relates to the player, and that's separate from the maps that are available. Maps are able to be played by anyone, whether they're level 1 or level 20 or level 30. Is that correct?
Yes.
And
so maybe there's a little confusion, because in your Andrews play data table, it says level name, and I think it just corresponds to the map name, right?
Right.
Yeah. So maybe it's just because of that small confusion.
Okay. But maps have to do with the world in which I'm playing. Levels have to do with the player and their relative experience or amount time that they've played. So another question that came in, can a player join a team and then choose to leave after seeing other players in the game? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. The player can choose to leave at any time. Perhaps the players they are playing with are very bad or are much better than they are, and they can choose to leave at any point. We don't have in the data why they left, but we will be able to see that they did not play the full duration of the round as it's presented.
I can actually add an interesting point to this, that a player can join a team and then look at the team, just play some time, and then he can actually switch teams within the same round. That would be interesting to look at, actually.
Great, thank you. We have another question about are there moment-by-moment actions in a round, or do we just have this summary data? And the answer is this data set that's being presented is summary data at the end of each round. So there are the same kill count and death count for the round, but we don't have moment by moment, second by second deaths and kills that are in the game. Another question: can we identify in the data who uses the instant play feature? I don't believe, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe that there's a specific flag in the data or that you even store it, whether somebody selected to get into the round by being randomly placed there or if they chose that particular server. Is that correct?
I don't think we have a hook for that in the data set, in the current data set, so
okay.
I don't know. I need to double check that, but I don't think we have it.
Okay, great. And then there's another question from the audience about your company's business model. And we've actually talked a lot about this. While on the one hand, you do, of course, want to be profitable and maximize the money for the organization, but you do have a real passion for customer experience, and at least in the conversations that you and I have had about wanting to maximize people's experience and enjoyment of the game. Would you say that that's consistent with the values of the company, that while, yes, you want to be profitable, you're really looking to maximize the enjoyment and the experience of your players?
Yeah, exactly. It's just like the primary reason of this study is just like, we are trying to understand how we can maximize or just our consumers' experience with our games. So obviously, we believe that it leads to increase in the number of games that we sold. But so it's like secondary objective now. The primary objective is try to understand how we can enhance that experience.
Great. So we had a question before. We have a question on the structure of the data. So I'm actually going to jump back just briefly to the slide that I had from before that shows Andrew's individual play data. And while there are, just for sake of space on the slide, we omitted some columns. You'll see that this is consistent with the kind of data that you'll see. So again, you'll have the round ID and the unique round ID and the round start date. You'll have the duration, what server type of server it was on, whether it was public or private. You'll have the game mode and the level name. How long did this particular player have? Their score, the kinds of things that they did, and the kill and death count. So let's take a look just for a moment at the third row down, the round ID 5042110. That was played the first time that Andrew played it on November 1st, 2011. We will actually have this same row as Andrew, where he had, let's see, 1 kill and 0 deaths, and he played for 347 seconds. We will actually have that same row for every single player who played in that same round on November 1st, 2011. That might be 3 other players. That might be 100 other players. We have all of them that were played there. So that when we say that we have over 750,000 different rounds, we have something like 18 million different individual results from playing in that round. And hence, as I mentioned at the beginning, we have, it is a very large, physically large data set, approaching 10 gigabytes of data. So let's go back to how do you actually get access to this data. We ask that a proposal be submitted, no more than 2,000 words, and please include items that are listed here on the bullet points, like the author's name and a summary and an abstract, and the biographies of the authors. It's very important, actually. The data sponsor is very interested in learning about team members' interests in gaming. I was interested to learn that you have to be a gamer in order to work for the company. That is a key piece. So researchers who are personally passionate about gaming, we'd love to hear from you and love to hear what you'd like to look at. We do ask that however long your proposal is and whatever it is, that you submit only a PDF. You can see, you can read more about the proposal format on the URL that's listed there. And we ask that you submit proposals no later than Monday, May 12th at 12 noon U.S. Eastern on the URL that's listed there. We will only accept them on that URL, and we ask that you submit a single PDF to that URL. All proposals will be evaluated for both academic contribution and potential to have an impact on the research sponsor's practice. All proposals will be evaluated by the people that you'll see listed there, along with representatives from the sponsor. And we're happy to answer any questions that you have prior to submitting the proposal, and you feel free to email the email address that's listed there. I should actually take this moment to say that questions that you submitted online here in this forum will be answered by email. You don't need to repeat your question back to us. We will get to you. But if you have additional questions, we're happy to respond via email. If this data set doesn't exactly suit you, we have other ones coming up, including using purchase history to identify customer projects. That's coming up actually very soon in the next month or so. We also have one upcoming on desktop software use and opportunities to analyze that. We have a conference coming up actually next week, May 1st, on the state of the industry for analytics. And you are welcome to register for that conference. You'll also find us online with our SSRN research paper series that we encourage you to check out. And we handle announcements on our website, wcai.wharton.upenn.edu. Joe and the other folks from the sponsor, we really appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much for being on the call this afternoon. We look forward to seeing your proposal and what you might do with this data in just a few weeks. And any questions you have, please send them in. Thank you very much.